that was
Well,
it.
that's perfect. I appreciate you explaining all those
Yeah,
things.
no,
I think
yeah,
it's good for context, especially when talking about the Black Death, as you have been, um, with the fact that, right, this large amount of the population as a
correct.
whole was kind of wiped out.
Yes, and to your point, it actually really, I can't get into the next part of how this kind of starts a domino effect in history, where the Black Death happens, and now this, for the next, I guess, 400 years or so, it's history gets really busy.
Yeah.
And it starts with the loss of the population in these areas, where now that the labor was still required, the nobility and the royalty now had to offer more to the form, like to the people in the serf classes, to have their labor, to make sure that in at the time society kept running. So with all of the people who would harvest the wheat and that dead, the people who were left would have to do double the amount of work. And
Yeah.
with so much people gone, the royalty, most royalty in Europe and in medieval kingdoms, weren't able to actually provide themselves through their own labor the things they needed to survive. So to keep that, we would they started offering these peasants private land that they can own once they've finished their work. And what
Okay.
happened after that is you start seeing, mostly in Western Europe, actually pretty quickly too, like right around, so like like 1400, I guess, there was some peasant revolts just after the Black Death ended, because in 1353 there was a 20-year period where, um, after the lords wanted to kind of go back to the previous system without paying the peasants for their work or
Yeah.
giving them plots of land to live on after they've completed like a season's harvest, and that caused a bunch of peasant revolts, which allowed that larger segment of the population to now keep more of the wealth they've earned, and it allowed them to start buying things as well for themselves. And that kind of started the rise of what we look at today as the merchant class in Europe, and in places like Italy and Spain and in England, where these people would be brought into the land. They would work for the church for 6 months, and they would be paid a fee, and then they go back and work for the nobility, and then the nobility would give them title deeds to like land. So it's like your family worked here, so you get a little plot of land after the harvest, and this is now your land and your property. And these people started generating purchasing power. They would start wanting goods as well themselves, like you and I would as well, like nowadays, right?
Yeah.
And well, back in those days, it was harder to move goods, and the luxury goods in places like the Far East would have to come over thousands of kilometers of land routes through like some of the most inhospitable places on earth. Like we know, like the Silk Road comes through China and through Siberia, and let alone the environment not being friendly to
Hmm.
transfer all those goods and trade items. It
Yeah.
was also dangerous because you had, the rise of the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean Sea area, which made it difficult for people going through Europe to try to use the Black Sea, because now that area was kind of in a bit of a war zone between the previous like Islamic, the Khanates that were left there
Hmm.
in the region at the end. So that
Yeah.
if you even survived getting through that region, then you'd have to trek all the way through to Siberia. So a lot of the royalty in Western Europe started paying these now emerged merchant class people that said, hey, you know what? We can do a joint venture. I'm going to pay you some money, and you're going to go find a shorter route. And this is where we start, getting the guys like Magellan and and I don't know why I'm blanking right now. Christopher Columbus.
I didn't know who you were going to say there, and then the fact that that's who you said, I was like, yeah,
I feel it's
I don't
because
know why you're blanking.
we're
No, I'm just kidding.
Canadian, so like we don't recognize that like our country was founded by Christopher Columbus technically, but like,
We don't have Columbus Day.
yeah, we don't have a Columbus Day. But Christopher Columbus was being paid by, I believe it was the Spanish government, to find a
Hmm.
shorter sea route to Asia. And as we all know, taking the shortcut, they stumbled onto where we are now. the New World. And so the Black Plague causes this rise in the majority of the population having more money, but it also now has the nobility and the royalty working with them to seek more and more goods and
Yeah,
seeking more luxury goods for themselves in far off lands because of all this pumped in capital now with the decline of the population from the plague. Within, I think, what was it, in 1456, I believe. Don't quote me on that 100%, but that's when Columbus landed in the New World. And he didn't just bring himself, he also brought the bubonic plague.